All right, well, welcome to today's Meetup live session. My name's Brian Guthrie, and I am Meetup's head of engineering. We're going to start off real quick just with some event guidelines. Just as a heads up, we're recording this on video. We're not recording you on video, we're just recording me on video, so I'm the one who has to live with it long term. But there will be a recording available later if you'd like to see it. Your audio will be muted, no worries to hit the mute button, but we love it when people ask questions, so we'll be monitoring the questions channel, and you'll have an opportunity to ask those a little bit later in the presentation. We are also using closed captioning. I'm using the Google Sheets closed captioning feature. Sorry, not Google Sheets, Google presentation software. We'll see how that goes. We were going to ask someone to do this for us, and then she pointed out that you can just use the Google thing. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. So give us some feedback after and let us know how you feel about it. Alrighty, so here's our agenda. First up is introduction. That's you and me all right now. That's now. We're looking at now. What happens then is I'm going to spend the next 25 minutes running through the state of software and tech at Meetup. Just try to give you a bit of a historical perspective on what the last couple of years have looked like, where we are right now in this moment, and then where we're headed, hopefully over the next year or so. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to have that Q&A session at the end there. So with no further ado, just checking my pocket watch here. All right, 3:05, perfect. This is the only thing I will start on time today, so I'm excited. So I want to talk a little bit today just about the history of Meetup tech. And some of you may have context on this, some of you don't, but for the benefit of the folks who are coming in sort of for the first time, Meetup is a real classic of the tech industry. Meetup started back in 2002, and Meetup's core code base dates from roughly 2003. We call our core code base Chapstick, because that was part of Meetup's pivot toward integrating what were then chapters and then later became groups as part of the Meetup product offering as our way of building community. And it's been worked on by generations of programmers, which is why I kind of picked out this geological strata picture here. I love code bases like this. I love seeing the evolution of ideas over time. And that's what really excited me about coming to work at Meetup, is that Meetup, I think in that moment, and I joined in early 2018, shortly after the WeWork acquisition. Meetup in that moment was coming to terms with the friction that they'd seen in their code base and looking to make a change there. And so I was asked to come in and help deal with that problem. And that's maybe a good segue into me a little bit. So as I mentioned, joined in early 2018. I came in as the director of engineering, working with some of our core teams here to upgrade and improve this core system, Chapstick. I then later took on a role as head of engineering that started late last year in December. And as part of that process, it prompted an evolution of our technical strategy, which is what we'll be talking about today. So then pivoting back to Chapstick here for a minute, Chapstick dates back to 2003, JVM Beast, roughly 4 major programming languages and 3,000 or so small ones, but predominantly Java, a lot of Python, a lot of Scala, and of course the ever-present JavaScript. And in the aggregate, give or take, depends on how it's feeling that day, it's about 1 million lines of code. And we've worked hard on trying to move things out of it, but that's the last time I checked in, that's roughly where we were hovering. This is intended, by the way, to I'm as I try to approach all code bases and classic systems, approaching it with the utmost respect for the people who did that work and who came before. Everyone who touched this put their soul into a part of what it does and into improving it and making it the best that they could. And so I try to view systems like this with a forensic lens, but not with blame for any particular person involved. It's just a way of thinking about how human beings think about code over time. Moving on to the next slide here. So by the, how many slides? Okay, good. I only advanced 1 slide. I was worried I clicked 8 times. By the time I joined, we'd already identified that this was an anchor for our code base. And there were 3 things that were consistently holding us back and making it hard for us to evolve the product. And again, those of you who've been with Meetup and have maybe seen some of my predecessors discuss this topic, this isn't new news, but you may not be surprised to understand that it is still a part of our ecosystem and we still work with it. But at the time, really, the three big issues for us were feedback cycles. First and foremost, we had put so much work as a team into improving build times and improving the feedback loops inside the code base, but we were still looking at things where builds would take 60 to 90 minutes to roll out to production, which was good enough to do continuous delivery, but not that bad in 2017, but not quite where we'd like it in a modern system. Additionally, it was difficult for us to run unit tests locally, and part of the friction involved in running and writing unit tests is what made it, I think, difficult for us to build a testing culture. We also had an issue with ownership and observability. Systems that large with that many lines of code, it's very easy for something to go wrong in a wide variety of different ways. And it was difficult to understand, which team should own this thing. If something goes wrong in production, who's on the hook for that? Who answers the phone in the middle of the night? And because of the uncertainty around the effects of a change, it made people fearful of making those changes. It made them worried about poking it because they didn't know if something would go wrong. And then finally, the aggregate effect of these things really did lead to some core issues with some of the code and architecture choices that had been made over time, but then hadn't aged especially well. In a system where it's difficult to write unit tests, these systems also tend to accrete things like singletons, and Chapstick has a lot of them, and it's difficult to pull out of those singletons, ironically, without some test pressure applied, and that was a dynamic that was hard to break. We also made a number of choices along the way that made sense for, I think, a tech organization in the early to mid decade of the 2000s, but that haven't necessarily served us right or weren't the right choice for all ages, as no technical choice is. But for example, we wrote our own object relational mapper system. We wrote our own RESTful API on the server side. We wrote our own sort of NoSQL dialect. There's a lot in there, and there's a lot that we wrote ourselves. And a lot of you will be familiar with the idea that kind of code isn't an asset necessarily. It's past a certain point, it's a liability, because you're on the hook for maintaining it. There's no community you can lean on for improvements. And that was the net effect. The net effect was a code base that felt unfortunately scary to a lot of people, even though code is code and it's all changeable. By the time I got there, and then through the WeWork era, we had really made two big bets to try to get out from this core system and evolve into a newer, fresher Meetup over time. And the first one here was the new web front end, which a lot of you who have followed Meetup's journey and may have been part of the rollout of that site in 2017 will probably remember. That was our attempt to build out a modern React-based single application and put a fresh face on the site and use that as one of our levers for integrating new features into the site. Prior to that, Meetup had been using a very conventional in the Java space, but what was feeling a bit old-fashioned approach of writing JSPs in Java land and writing jQuery and using that to build out the web experience. And a prominent part of the Meetup user experience is still grounded in those technologies. And that has become more difficult for us to iterate on over time, as it has for many organizations. So that was the first big bet, was a React single page application. And the second big bet was a stab at integrating a streams architecture into what we were trying to do on the back end. You see what I did there with the web and the stream, like a visual metaphor? Is it working? Anyway, we were using a technique called change data capture, which involves hooking a script up to the output log of our core production database, reading those events out from the production log, writing them into a stream. I believe at the time we're using an AWS-based Kinesis stream, and then performing a series of steps on those events to transform them into higher level semantic events. And the idea there was that we could pass the data through Chapstick, feed that data into a series of other microservices, and then build out new Meetup product experiences against those microservices. And it wasn't just these two things. We placed a lot of bets. There were a lot of different techniques we were using to try to work around the limitations of this core system. But for our purposes, I'm just focusing on these two big ones. You know, unfortunately, both of these two things still required tweaking the back end, and the back end retained all of the issues that had always plagued us. The feedback loops were still long. It was still scary to touch. It was still a system that was problematic in many ways. And so after spending about a year trying to replace Chapstick with some of the streams work, we unfortunately and regrettably made the difficult decision to move past that project because it wasn't yielding the results that we needed as fast as we needed. Conversely, you know, on the website, we had a lot of early success shifting pages over to the new website. But as I mentioned earlier, you'll have noticed that many of our core web experiences are still in the old system. That's because likewise, it had proved really difficult for us to build new web experiences in this site because the problem still remained that in order to build them, we needed to surface a lot of the data through APIs. And building internal APIs against our Chapstick system had proved problematic. And we were going about it a lot of different ways, but we were still struggling with it. Chapstick remained the bottleneck for those systems. So fast forward maybe a little bit to September 2019. You may remember a little company called WeWork, right? So WeWork acquired Meetup in 2017. We were there with Meetup through this whole journey. And after a series of mishaps, ultimately WeWork made the decision to cancel their IPO. And you know, the rest is history. You've seen it in the business headlines. But for Meetup specifically, the message that WeWork sent to all of its subsidiaries, all the companies that they had acquired was, we are selling you to focus on our core business. And that raised a challenge for us almost immediately. Under WeWork's aegis, we had been given a lot of resources and encouraged to grow and really shoot for the moon. And all of a sudden in this moment, it became evident for us, as I'm sure it was for a lot of employees at WeWork and at every other subsidiary, that we had to get a lot leaner and a lot meaner. And lean, you know, we knew how to get lean. There are ways to shift a business in direction that brings you in line with your revenues. But meaner was tricky. Were we set up for mean? Did we have mean in our DNA? We like to think of ourselves as like just a really, really nice place to work. We are nice to each other. And for that and other reasons, it had been hard for us to corral ourselves into a limited set of tech choices. And in fact, we'd been following a team strategy that optimized for autonomy, for technical autonomy, under the presumption that teams could and often would choose the stacks that were right for them for the problem that they were trying to solve in the moment. That led to the exploration of a lot of different and sometimes divergent paths. Are we a container shop or a serverless shop? Do we do Scala? Do we do JavaScript? Do we use read-write data stores? Is there a future in event sourcing? Can we use Kinesis streams in some other way? So you sometimes hear, there's a great site out there called boringtechnology.club where the author speaks about the value of using technologies that are sometimes not especially well suited, but whose flaws are at least understandable and predictable. There's another metaphor in there about sort of spending innovation tokens. You know, how many things can you afford to understand at the same time and grow in at the same time? And some of those innovation tokens could be technical choices. Some of them could be product choices. I think what I would say, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, is that we spent a lot of those innovation tokens, and focus became really hard for us. So that was part of the slimming down process for us, is understanding what to do about our tech. And so we did something that I have never seen done before, which is under the leadership of our CPO at the time, Gift Constable. We ran a red versus blue debate, a red team and blue team debate. And the way this worked was that we set up a red team that was tasked with attacking our pre-existing architecture and the choices that we'd made, and a blue team that was set up to defend it. And it was a whole event. You know, we scheduled meetings and sessions to put, you know, arguments together and structure an agenda. It was a whole thing. I found myself shockingly and reluctantly coming around to the red team and participating on the red team side. I'm an inveterate incrementalist myself. I really, really believe in my heart that you can fix systems like Chapstick and refactor them back to a good place. But we had done so much of it at that point that it seemed like it was going to be very difficult for us to pull our way out of it. And the results of the debate really were that the red team won out. Red team with shades of purple, right? So we made the decision to not just build a new website and not just try to pull away at the data using this change data capture technique, but really start from as close to a blank sheet of paper on the software side as we knew how to. Not chip away at the edges, you know, really go at the heart of it. And that's, you know, more specifically or in a slightly more fine-grained manner. You know, where we landed at the back end was mostly rewrite the core business logic and the core data persistence. There are systems that still live in Chapstick and likely always will. There are notifications systems in there that I don't think we're going to be able to replace in the short term. You know, the things that send all of those emails that I know you all love so much to receive from Meetup in their prolific glory. The mobile apps we chose to, from a code standpoint, keep broadly as is. They were in relatively good shape. We thought there was some risk associated with a full rewrite, but we gave our teams a lot of leeway to go in and refactor and try to get out some of the stuff that's in there. As you'll have noticed, we just launched dark mode on the iOS app and the Android app, and behind the curtains on that one, under the cover of dark modeness, we did a lot of refactoring work to improve the core architecture. The Android app on the Kotlin and Java side contained a lot of the same architectural choices that Chapstick had made as well. There were a lot of singletons in there. It was causing a lot of friction for the team, and we wanted to offer the mobile engineers the same affordance to go in and sharpen their tools. And then for the web piece, we opted for a rewrite. Both of our old websites had made some problematic user experience choices. Obviously, you know, most of you are familiar with the logged in homepage. And then some folks had followed us through the saga in 2017 with the launch then, but both of them also contained difficult code choices. And even for the new website that we built, fundamentally the challenge for us as an organization in that moment was we had asked some really sharp, really smart people to put a ton of thought into building out a web platform that we thought we would be really happy with. And they did some wonderful work, but it came with a real trade-off, which is that we built and ultimately open sourced our own web platform. It's called the Meetup web platform. It's on GitHub and you can find it if you like. But that placed an additional, you know, building out and maintaining an entire platform placed a burden on us. And we knew that in this moment, we had to start relying more heavily on tools where we could count on a community of contributors to continually make it better, and for us to give back to the community where it's prudent to do so, but frankly draft in their wake where it wasn't. We knew that as a lean technology team, we really had to focus on shipping core product features, and so that's where we landed on the web piece. That raised a set of challenges, which is, well, okay, if we're going to replatform and rewrite these things, to what? Where do we go from here? And this is the part of the presentation where we start transitioning a little bit away from the VH1 behind the music vibe of the band that makes it big and then gets deep into drugs and alcohol and more into the list of open source product logos. That's coming soon. But in the meantime, we started in defining our values, right? And I think we decided that what our values needed to be in this moment is that from a replatforming standpoint, that tech had to take its cues from the needs of the product and your needs, and that's where we've tried to focus, and I'll get into that in a little bit. We really had to stick to common conventions. We had to move out of a place where we were allowing each team to make autonomous choices on a lot of these things. We wanted to pick an evolutionary architecture approach that optimized for making the right short-term decision, knowing and understanding that it would change later. We knew that we weren't a company that has at root, Meetup is not an ops company. Meetup is a product company. We try to build community for you all. So we wanted to make technology choices that leaned less heavily on operations and observability and more heavily on our partners, particularly AWS for managing a lot of that stuff. And we wanted to continue to maintain really tight focus on concerns like security. That's actually been something that we've spent a great deal of time thinking about in the last 6 months. And as a result of that, here's the list. Here's where we landed. And I'll get into the specifics on each of these. but I figured I'd pull this up and give everyone a moment to chew. This was the net effect of these choices. This need for this need to leverage community solutions to the challenges that we had, the desire to share a common set of conventions and evolve our code together side by side, and hey, okay. That was just my friendly folks on the Meetup side saying, yes, Brian, yes, we can see you. We can get on with it. Okay, so let's move back here. So we wanted to start with the idea of one language. There are lots of lovely languages out there. My heart was broken because we didn't choose Clojure. I will forever be a Clojure stan, but I'm very fond of TypeScript as well. I think it makes a really good, really pragmatic set of choices, is applicable in a wide variety of circumstances. We knew that we could tackle it, we could use it to tackle a number of different engineering challenges along the way. There are things to celebrate and things to not celebrate about the broader JavaScript ecosystem, but it's undeniable that there's a huge amount of community activity right there right now, and we wanted to be able to use as much of it as we could to build our new ecosystem out. It's also accessible, it's relatively straightforward to hire for. It wasn't exotic for us, it wasn't a stretch for us. We'd done a bunch of flow work, we did some TypeScript work in production. It didn't require a huge amount of additional onboarding. We briefly considered the idea of moving into a React native space rather than keeping our existing native apps, and this would have bought us an option to do that. And ultimately, we chose not to. Ultimately, again, as I mentioned earlier, we decided to stick with our current apps. Next thing we did, we decided that we wanted a monorepo. First, because we'd had a little bit of experience working with monorepos, albeit not as well, by way of Chapstick. Second, because we knew we wanted a mechanism for enforcing common conventions throughout the engineering team. And third, because I think my theory or my belief is that it's easier to start with a repo and break it out into smaller pieces than it is to start with smaller pieces and decide later you want to merge them back together. If all else fails, if you want to break up a monorepo, you can fork a bunch of times and carve out some individual pieces. Whereas munging these things together, once you have people on a million different versions of dependencies, becomes really, really, really tough. So that's where we are right now. We're in one new monorepo. We call it Build Meetup. And we're using Yarn workspaces. We flirted with the idea of using Bazel for this, and we spiked it out. We like Bazel as a technology. We use Bazel in Chapstick. I'm very fond of Bazel personally. It was a little experimental for this space. It didn't feel idiomatic to the community. And we've been really happy with Yarn. Yarn's been, I think, just the ticket for us. It's simple, it's straightforward, looks and feels like JavaScript, but it also allows us to leverage common conventions in a lot of places. Let's see. For serverless, we are heavily invested in AWS Lambda, and this was a no-brainer for us. We really value our partnership with Amazon. We've gotten a ton of great support from them. We've worked with Symphonia in the past, which is a great boutique consultancy specializing in serverless technologies specifically. We knew that this is the route that we want to go, and we've been very happy with our work in serverless so far. And you know, the great thing about investing in Amazon as a platform is that you can do nothing and their stuff keeps on getting better, right? They're always committed to improving, and they do listen to your feedback. So very happy with that choice. We also made a bet on GraphQL. This is another thing where we had done a lot of internal work prior. We had a team build an internal GraphQL API for running on top of Chapstick that actually proved to be a very successful way of getting data out in the same vein as the streams work that we did earlier. We'd had teams like Meetup Now make smaller bets on GraphQL. This is the first time that we said we want to choose this one thing and make that the new way that we serve Meetup externally. And likewise, there's been a bit of a learning curve, but we didn't have to spend an innovation token to get here. We had enough context with it, and we've been very happy with the choice. And then also we made one notable exception, I think, to our general preference for AWS for infrastructure, which is that we're working with GitHub Actions right now. And this was an overwhelming developer user experience choice. This is really something that our engineers pushed for. They really appreciate the ecosystem. They appreciate how easy it is to get us up and running. Weirdly, our biggest problem with GitHub Actions has actually been billing and making sure that we're able to top up minutes appropriately. And I think the divestment from WeWork complicated that somewhat. But as a technology, we're very happy with it. And we moved almost all of our builds onto this pretty quickly. It was one of the more straightforward migrations I've been a part of, and I've been involved in continuous integration and build and DevOps work for years and years and years. And then finally, we have maybe our most controversial choice, which is Gatsby.js. And for this, we spent an innovation token. We hadn't done any Gatsby work prior in production. We knew that there was some disagreement in the JavaScript ecosystem as to where people were headed from a platform standpoint. We like Gatsby because we like the performance aspect. We like the simplicity of serving in production. As I mentioned earlier, we're spending we want to focus a little bit less time on our ops and a little bit more on building up the core product, and Gatsby is great for that. We also operate at a scale that I think at the time that we chose it was still a bit of a stretch for the Gatsby ecosystem. We have an enormous number of pages out in the wild that we use for SEO purposes. I want to say that the number that comes to mind for me, I think, is 150,000. We have a lot of them. And that represents a real challenge from a build process standpoint. It also represented a challenge because, as I said, we try to use Lambda for almost everything. And at our scale, it's difficult for us to use Lambdas to parallelize the Gatsby build process. Not the end of the world, but there's a little bit of friction there. We've been happy with it, but a lot of the, and by the way, the fundamental architecture with Gatsby is that there's a general preference for pre-rendering most pages and then rehydrating those pages with dynamic experiences as they load. We wanted a really rich, crisp, fast user experience for people who are coming to our website, and by and large, we've got that. There's a bit of a learning curve in understanding the difference between the pre-rendered pages and then what gets rehydrated later. But from an understandability and from a conventions standpoint, it's a much stronger pick than where we were coming from. So I'm happy with it, and I'd recommend it to other folks who are looking at the space. I think I'm running out of time here a little bit, so I'm going to try to speed up. Just want to give people a quick. I'm not our director of product, or sorry, our VP of product, but this is roughly speaking where we are in the timeline. We have laid the foundation of a new Meetup. We are working at the moment to improve event discovery. We've rolled out improvements to search. We've rolled out improvements to the homepage. We're now in the beta process for testing a new experience with organizers. You can get in on the beta waiting list if you like. Coming next, two big things. We're going to be expanding that beta and trying to roll it out to a lot of new groups. And we're going to be working to improve our support for online events and our comms tools. We haven't iterated here as aggressively as we'd like. In this moment in particular, it's really important that we give every group, I think online, a great event experience. So expect more to come here very soon. And that's really it. That's really it for the main content for me. Here's how you can beta test a new event scheduling tool if you'd like. Please go to that link. We are hiring right now. We like kind engineers. We like software crafty people. We're hiring engineers, we're hiring designers, we're hiring product folks. Please reach out for careers. If you would like, that's my email address. Please reach out to me if you have questions, comments, concerns. If you need to yell at me or with me about some aspect of the Meetup experience. I myself am a paying organizer. I pay out of pocket for my Meetup account, so I share some of the pain that you experience, but we're working very hard over here to continue to upgrade and modernize the platform. So that's it for me. I am going to pivot over here to have my Slack set up with my folks on the Meetup side who are trying to queue up some questions over here. And the first question I see up here is, where did it go? I had one. Oh, here. How do we handle onboarding? Michael asked, how do we handle onboarding new employees into roles that need to understand broad areas of a big code base like yours, especially when it's in motion? That is a phenomenal question, truly. I mean, it's a challenge for us. It's a challenge for a lot of organizations, I think. The way we do it at presently, I think, is that we bifurcate from an onboarding process where we ask engineers to start in understanding our system. So we don't try to throw everything at everyone all at once. We have a team right now that's dedicated to ongoing improvements and maintenance in our core systems, into the Chapstick system that I mentioned earlier. Folks in that code base and in that ecosystem need a really rich grounding in JVM, and they really need to have an appetite for tearing apart old code bases, refactoring, upgrading, modernizing, modularizing. That's really the focus of that team. For everyone else on the web and backend side, we're really asking them to focus in on the build Meetup side. But part of the justification for narrowing our technical portfolio as much as we did was really onboarding. We want to be able to bring someone in and say, If you work in software here in this ecosystem, you're working in TypeScript. If you need to build a website, that's where you go to build a website. It's in Gatsby. If you need to do some backend work, that's where you go. It's in go write a Lambda. We expose it through GraphQL. We want to make the choices prudent and interesting, but relatively narrow. That's my sort of short answer there. Let's see. Here we are. Okay, so we have a question around API usage. Alrighty. Joe asked, for several years starting around 2010, the developers in the Meetup community volunteered to help Meetup engineers test, troubleshoot, and perfect the Meetup.com API. After many hours developing helper tools, scripts, WordPress plugins, WeWork took the API away and made it a pro tier exclusive. Will the new owners of Meetup reopen the API to all pricing tiers? This was a valuable resource that allowed us to automatically tweet and create Facebook ads when a new event was published, automatically print name tags, etc. Adobe Lightroom plugin for uploading images. We in the non-pro tier helped perfect the API, and then WeWork took it away. Can we get a commitment that it will be restored by the new owners? I am not in a position to offer you a commitment on that today. This isn't a question that I've gotten in the past, and to be honest, it's not something that we're thinking about very deeply right now. The era in which you all were part of the Meetup technical community, helping us to evolve the Meetup API, I wasn't there for any of that, and I can't really speak to the, you know, I trust and understand that the depth of your commitment, and I'm extremely thankful for the time that you gave us in that era for helping to perfect this thing. My experience in general has been that maintaining these APIs over time are really tough. We have a huge software maintenance burden as it is, and the issue with an external API that's difficult to monetize is that for every nine wonderful community-oriented developer out there that's using it to do great work, we have one person out there that's scraping our data or using it to build a derivative product or something, right? The abuse that it suffers often isn't worth the maintenance cost for us as well. So I will certainly take your question back to our product team. We have someone who's actively looking at API product strategy right now. I'll take your question back to them, and we'll try to get you a public response. If you want to email me directly, I can hook you up with them. And thank you for asking the question. Let's see. What are build times like now? We found Gatsby to be really tough once you hit 100,000 pages. We're actually not quite there yet. We haven't fully rolled out the build process to incorporate everything that we have in production. I anticipate some friction there. I think that it'll probably take some bespoke engineering work for us to go at our scale. But right now, build times aren't that bad, since we're not at that level of that stage of development yet. Let's see. I'm not seeing any more questions over here. Do we have more stuff in chat? Oh no, here's just the Q&A feature. I'll pop this open directly. Oh, now Zoom isn't showing me anything. Oh, still unsure about the relevance of Dylan. There was no relevance to Dylan. I just liked the song, and we needed something peppy to start out with. The spider's web on Maggie's farm. I was trying to do a thing with, like, here's the website, and there's a web, and then we're talking about streams, and there's a stream. It wasn't my strongest visual metaphor. I will give you that. I am trying to figure out why Zoom is not pulling up the questions for me here. This is great. I love technology. Oh, here we are. Okay, technology, it's the best. Awesome full rewrite of full stack. How'd you get C-level buy-in on that? Well, I think the short answer is that, at least in those early stages, C-level was with us all the way. They were the ones who had come to the same place conceptually, that they understood that we needed something to change in order for us to develop software more quickly, and they were at their wits' end, I think, in the same way that a lot of the rest of us were. They knew that we needed to find something to go in on to change, and they took a close look at, I think, the technical choices just through the lens of, what does this imply for operational cost? What does this imply for your ability to upskill and hire people on that basis? They wanted some understanding of the decision-making process, but we were very fortunate in that in that moment for us and our company, everyone was on the same page about the need to do something really significant in order to move the needle and shift our technology strategy. Jobs, remote or on-site. We are remote through the end of this year. We are remote at least through June of next year. We are remote first. Both of our directors of engineering are fully remote. If you are working remotely, please, by all means, apply. We are recruiting in we work US East hours, but recruit in states across the US. We recruit in Canada as well. Let's see. As an organizer, I really felt in recent years there were Meetup engineering limitations behind the scenes. Customer service would do their best, but could only seem to obtain band-aids. It was painful to me as an organizer. It would have been less painful if I knew rather than only guessed what was going on. Any comments? Should organizers had been in the loop in the past? Gosh, that's a tough one. I'm glad to hear you say that this gives you some context into the struggle that we were going through. I don't think that we had necessarily been reticent about it. I think our previous CTO, Yvette, who's wonderful, she spoke about it at length in the past. But we probably, and I think we identified this as an opportunity to improve in the past, we weren't really in close touch with our organizers about all of those things. And so, you know, part of our goal in this year has been to do more of these Meetup Live events, to blog more frequently, to really do a better job of connecting with you all. Believe me, I feel that pain as a paying organizer. Prior to joining Meetup, I was very much like, what are they doing over there? And I understand a lot better now, but that doesn't necessarily excuse it. It's still on us to get over the hump and get back to a place where we're able to deliver a great customer experience. Let's see. How do you manage your AWS Lambda functions? Very carefully. Next question. No, we use CloudFormation. We spent a lot of time playing with discrete AWS sub accounts in the past. We're doing a little bit less of that right now just because the complexity overhead. The metaphor I try to use for Lambdas for my team is that, you know, I think of them as fingers of a hand rather than services in and of themselves. A service is a conceptual set of capabilities, often with their own backend data stores. Lambdas are the implementation details for that, but I don't think of it necessarily as an architecture of itself. Oh, does not shift. I'm trying to grab these as they come in. I know that there were some questions on Twitter about accessibility. I want to address that briefly. We know that it's an issue and we're working on it. There's no excuse for not being fully accessible in this day and age. It hasn't been something we've prioritized as aggressively as we wanted to in the past. It's absolutely on the radar. We want to be better for you there. I have not tried Meetup using a blindfold, and I will after this. Let's see. Not shifting to React Native was discarded due to the missing skills for mobile engineers. No, absolutely not. We had a wonderful mobile engineering team, actually. We had some really, really strong folks. But I think the concern there was, we also heard a lot of anecdotal evidence from other companies who had shifted to React Native and then later got cold feet. We didn't think that it was really the constraint in the system for us. It wasn't the bottleneck. We knew that we'd be able to get good work done there, and it would have introduced some additional complexity. And at the end of the day, we had to trust our technical folks when they said, look, this is the right path forward. How have your observability practices evolved? That's a thing I could talk about all day. Good grief. Let's see. We started with, I think, a holistic sort of New Relic-based approach. We've moved away a little from that over time. It hasn't been as good a fit for the Lambda ecosystem. So as a result, we rely really heavily on AWS tooling right now. We use CloudWatch Insights for a combination of, obviously, you know, text logging and the ability to run numerical queries against those. We've played with, or I shouldn't say played with, we've paid for and used Honeycomb in the past. I'm a huge fan of Honeycomb as a system, but unfortunately it's not part of our technical ecosystem right now, but I do recommend it to others when it comes up. Let's see. 2 more minutes. I'm just gonna try to keep moving here. What's the size of the engineering team? I think currently we have 30 headcount, and then there's another 10 or so contractors that we work with. Let's see. When will users be able to find the start times of available meetups in their local time zone? Unfortunately, I'm the wrong person to ask about that, but if you want to email me directly, I'm happy to forward you to the right person and we can follow up. Let's see, what type of machine learning model do you use? Ditto, I would love to talk about that. We'll get our head of machine learning and data in here at some point to do another Meetup Live event. I'm not the right person to ask about that, but keep that question warm, email me, and we'll follow up with you on that. Let's see. Let's keep going here. Is there a feature roadmap we can see and have an influence on? That's a great question. I think that that's a practice that companies are going back and forth on. I noticed that GitHub just started publishing a public roadmap. I can likewise email me. I can take that back to our product leadership, and we'll get you an answer on that. I think with that, I am being told that my time is up. I apologize for the answers that I wasn't able to go to in a ton of depth. I thank you all for your questions, especially the tough questions. Please do hold us to account and keep our feet to the fire. Your feedback is what helps keep us moving forward. It keeps us connected to our community, and it makes sure that we prioritize the things that matter to you. So don't stop pushing. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely day. I will see you all later.